So every time I think of AI, there's really two buckets when I think of the intersection of security and AI. So the first one is how you secure AI, right? So AI itself represents security risk to an organization. So the responsible adoption of AI and how you go about securing these algorithms is in and of itself a very complex topic, right? In some capacities, right, AI is software, right? So all of your best practices of how you lock down software, how you lock down code, how you manage the data in, the data out, how you threat model all those data flows, all of that actually stays the same. So a tremendous amount of that still stays the same. But there's unique nuance in that particular algorithm, right? Is it a distributed neural network, right? So is there data or those initial neurons maybe forward deployed on a endpoint system, right? And then I have to secure that. And then what does it mean when those little vectors make their way to the next level of neurons? It's maybe on a backend cloud, right? There's a lot of really unique security considerations associated with the fact that it is AI and how AI operates and what kind of model are you using, right? Um, so there's interesting security implications, there's interesting privacy implications associated with just the security of AI, right? There's also a lot of emerging research around just ways to attack AI models, right? Things like how do you, if it's in training mode, right? How you can potentially do like model training poisoning, right? Is there a way for attackers, and there are ways for attackers, right, to build in, you can think of them as backdoors, but basically build in the answer they want into an AI model, right? So think a safety critical system, right? If tremendous amount of training data, right? If attackers can insert very specific pieces of training data that later represent like a way for them to get the answer they wanted out of an AI model, right? That's really powerful. So things like model training poisoning, there's not good ways to detect that right now. But then even once it's in infancy mode, things like adversarial perturbations or model inversion, where they potentially try to extract things like the training data back out of the model, right? The training data, maybe the training data was protected information, it was protected health information, it may have privacy concerns. Models right now actually are not regulated, right? Like a healthcare model, right, that was trained on HIPAA protected private data, right? The model is not considered protected, right? But there have been some emerging research around how you can potentially invert that model, right, to get some of the original training data back out of the model. Because at the end of the day, right, each of that pieces of training data had an effect on all these vectors, right, and the weights that went into that model. So that's really interesting, right? How do you secure models, right? How do you detect if your model is invertible, right? How do you detect if your model is subject to adversarial perturbations where they may be able to keep manipulating input until they can find a case where essentially the model makes the wrong choice, right? If the model says the wrong answer, right, is there a way for them to exploit that? Again, think safety critical systems, financing, banking, right? If you can find a way to trick the AI model to give you the wrong answer, that might be exploitable. All of those are emerging areas of research, right? There are not good methods out there for how you detect if the model you're using is susceptible to those. So I think that responsible adoption of AI is a really interesting facet of AI. But then on the other side of that, you have, okay, but putting all that aside for a second, AI still is a really powerful force multiplier for performing things that are really human intensive. And a lot of security work is very human intensive when you think of things like threat intelligence, vulnerability hunting, developing patches, right? Documentation, very human intensive. And so there's also on the other side of the house, right? There's security of AI, but then there's AI for security. And so there's also this really emerging, interesting opportunity, right, for us to actually apply AI to force multiply those humans, right? There is a deficit in security talent out there for the number of growing security opportunities and needs in these tech companies and basically any company that has any digital presence. And the and one of the ways, right, is let's increase the talent pool in the pipeline, right? But the other way is also let's force multiply the humans we have with good tooling. And one of those ways to make that tooling better, right, is to empower it with AI. So I've seen some really interesting use cases of AI models, for example, being trained to help build vulnerability patches, right? When you become aware of a vulnerability in one piece of code, right? A lot of companies have multi-products, right? You've got a lot of products that do the same thing. There's code reuse all over the place. So as new vulnerabilities emerge, right, having AI help you identify where is that in all your other code? Can you help me develop the patch? And then it still goes to a human, right? You still need that human to have eyes on glass, but you've just taken something that may have taken a human a week, and the AI can reduce that down to maybe the human taking a couple hours to review those patches versus having to track all that stuff down themselves. Because it's not as simple as like copy find, right? For trying to match if this vulnerability is in other code, right? Because there's contextual usage, right? The AI models can understand that, right? That maybe the vulnerabilities are named or value variables are named differently. Like maybe the order of instructions is a little different, but it's similar enough, right? That this may be also susceptible to that vulnerability, right? That takes a long time for a human to find that. And so I'm really excited about these opportunities that are emerging in some of these pieces, things like threat intelligence and threat hunting, right? Where it's super human intensive, and the human will still play a huge role in it. But there are so many sort of repeatable tasks, right, that we can empower those humans with AI powered tools. And so that aspect of AI, I'm really excited for about how that can help solve some of the basically deficit in the workforce that we have in security.